What is up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos. This time for Tuesday, February 15th. Nice little day after Valentine's Day. We have a very solid, I believe, 7-game Tuesday slate as the All-Star break comes up. I'm your host, Justin Bales, joined by Spike for this podcast. How are you doing, Spike?
I'm doing great, man. Feel good. Good start to the week, and yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing good too. Feels like a fun week. We have until Thursday. The All-Star break starts Friday, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
So we have until Thursday, and I believe that we have like really good slates up until Thursday too. Like I think at least 6 games on all of them. 7 might be the lowest actually, but someone would have to check that. I don't know 100% for sure. I just know that we don't have any ridiculously small slates leading up to All-Star break. But then I think we get what like a week off of basketball or something, right?
Yeah. More or less about a full week. Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy. But let's start breaking down tonight. Before we get started, if you enjoy the podcast, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. You can turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Also, drop any comments you have below. Spike and I will be in throughout the day to answer them. I guess prior to actually jumping into this slate, we do want to quick show you the projections. If you're watching this on YouTube, I did just pull them up on the screen. You can look at them here. These are one of the aspects that you get with our core plays package, which obviously can be found at dfskarma.com. You can see up in the top left-hand corner, you can see the little pricing option there. That's where you go to pick up the core plays. Or if you just go down to the description below, not the subscription, if you go down to the description below, we have the link directly there that you can click. But this is what you get. Sorry, none of the stuff was on the screen there. Player, position, team, salary, all the normal stuff. We have projected points, floor points, ceiling points. Those kind of help you in tournaments and cash games. Advanced metrics such as assist rate, rebound rate, pace boost, usage, stuff like that. Ownership projections, minute projections. Then you have the fantasy points per minute that each player scores. You have the karma value, which is essentially their value based on their price, point per dollar type of deal there. Last night, pretty insane that Nikola Jokic is the number 1 point per dollar at also being 12-2. But, the dude is absolutely incredible at basketball. Right below him, we had the minimum priced Quentin Grimes, who literally everyone's going to use. But that's what we have on specifically the projections. Along with those, you do get our premium content. You get into our premium Discord, and you also obviously get our core plays. Going back to tonight's slate, we have 7 games. We'll start with the injury news, running this down very quickly. Marquise Chris and Theo Pinson both out for Dallas. Trey Burke's questionable. They will have Davis Bertans and Spencer Dinwiddie. On the opposite side, Tyler Hero has already been ruled out. Jimmy Butler and Caleb Martin are both questionable, so that should change the slate quite a bit. Lauri Markkanen will continue to miss time for Cleveland. John Collins has been ruled out, I believe, for the next couple of games for Atlanta, while Bogdan Bogdanovic and DeLone Wright are both questionable. Not too much going on in the Philly-Boston game. I believe James Harden is out once again, correct?
Yep.
He should be back soon. I know that they posted a bunch of videos of them playing together or practicing together, I guess. They also showed Ben Simmons in Brooklyn with him and Kevin Durant. But for Charlotte, Jalen McDaniels and Cody Martin both out again. Not too much going on for Minnesota. Xavier Tillman is the big one out for Memphis. Ja Morant, who obviously will change the slate, is questionable for the Grizzlies as well. Isaiah Jackson, Chris Duarte, and Miles Turner all ruled out for Indiana. Malcolm Brogdon, questionable for them. Giannis missed last night, but he's expected to play tonight. George Hill also missed last night. I believe he's expected to play tonight as well, but just kind of keep an eye on them because neither one missed for rest. They missed for different types of sorenesses. I believe George Hill's was his neck, which seems a little bit worse than Giannis, who was his ankle. But both of them are expected to play. It's just that they may be out once again. You have Landry Shamet and Cameron Payne both out for Phoenix, and then Luke Kennard was out last night. You're going to want to keep an eye on him, but I believe he's questionable for the slate tonight. Shifting into position by position, starting at point guard, what do you have for us here, Spike?
Oh yeah, start at the top. I have no issues going to Luke at all. It's a relatively tough matchup, but this is someone who's pretty much matchup proof. He's just the leader of that team with no Kristaps now. It really kind of all falls on him, and he's just been posting triple doubles like it's his job, and it's 12K, but I mean I don't think it's too much for him. If you want to go there, I have no issues at all. You go down a little bit more. I mean, the same kind of goes for LaMelo Ball, who's at 9,100. His price keeps getting hiked up a little bit more, but his upside is just crazy. He gets a pretty good matchup against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Not much more to say about him. Chris Paul at 8,800, his price has kind of dropped a little bit. I think he was at like 9,600 a couple days ago. So I have no issues going there against a Clippers team that just doesn't scare me defensively. I'm pretty sure that you already mentioned that I believe Brogdon's out for tomorrow. Tyrese Halliburton at 8,500 makes for a really good option against a Bucks team that struggles against the three-point shot. Especially with Brogdon out, he just kind of commands that offense. He always has the ball in his hands. So I still think there's some upside there, even at 8,500. You go down some more, and Darius Garland's kind of been in a little bit of a funk. So his price has kind of dropped to 7,400, which is just way too cheap for the upside we've seen with him. I don't think LeVert being there really hurts him too much, as they really don't play alongside each other too much. And he's going up against the Atlanta Hawks, who just really aren't that good against guarding the guards or just defense in general. With Harden still out, Tyrese Maxey at 6,500, I think is a little too cheap for what he can do. Matchup against the Celtics, it's not good. It's not bad. It's there. He's a pretty high usage guy. He's pretty much the number 2 behind Embiid. So I got no issues there. You could also interest me in Reggie Jackson at 6,400, or Norman Powell getting injured. They just got him and he's injured already, so that really stinks. But Reggie Jackson's gonna have to be on the court a lot, especially if Luke Kennard gets ruled out again. They only have one other point guard, and that's Brandon Boston Jr. So expect heavy minutes from him if that's the case. Either way, he's going to play 30 to 35 minutes. It's not a great matchup against the Suns, but someone's got to produce for that team, and he seems to do it on a nightly basis. Other than that, I think Patrick Beverley at 5K is still a little too cheap. Gets a pace-up spot against the Hornets. It seems you always want to attack the Hornets just because, they just play so fast. So it just gives you extra possessions for whatever team is playing them. And at 5K, Patrick Beverley's still way too cheap. Other than that, I don't see a lot of other value right now. I'm sure it'll open up, but that's about what I got for point guard.
Yeah, I mean, you start at the top. Luka Doncic, 100% viable. If Ja Morant plays, I also think that he's a really good option against New Orleans. They don't really have anyone that's going to slow him down at the rim. I think if Malcolm Brogdon's out, he's actually questionable for the time being, but I feel like he's been questionable for like the last 5 weeks in a row. It's crazy. So it feels like he's probably going to miss again. But if he is out, Tyrese Halliburton's way too cheap. I do really like that price tag. Darius Garland, you talked about. Completely agree there. Atlanta gives up a ridiculous amount of assists. Now, the big thing is, I think in their last game, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Rajon Rondo played like 33 minutes. Garland didn't play in that game, correct?
he did play, for your first question, Rondo did play 33 minutes. I want to say Garland played.
He didn't.
It was against Philly, right?
Garland played against Philly. Garland did not play against Indiana the night before. That's when
Correct.
Rondo played
Yeah.
33 minutes. Okay,
Yeah.
so playing against Philly, completely fine. The weird thing about Garland, 1 assist in that game. We know that he comes with a lot of assist potential, and Atlanta is just terrible against guarding assists. They give up, I believe, the most assists in the NBA to point guards at, I want to say it's slightly over 10 per game over like the last last 7 games or their last 15 games. Not sure which one of those two, but it is one of those two. So I do think that Garland's very, very interesting. Maxey, obviously coming off of a bad game, but 6,500, I'm completely fine with him. I don't necessarily love the matchup against Boston, but I'm also not really going to shy away from it. I think as you go down more, Patrick Beverley at 5K makes sense. Derek White at 5,600, I don't have any issues. Just the big thing that I don't love is that he has yet to play over 30 minutes with the Boston Celtics, which, you know, when you get a matchup against Philly, I don't necessarily love if you're not getting the time. And then I think the big one here, just because he is point guard eligible, point guard small forward eligible, is Lance Stevenson. Chris Duarte is already been ruled out, so Stevenson should play bigger minutes. He played 32 minutes against Minnesota in his last game, dropped 33 fantasy points. At 4K, Stevenson really only needs to play like 20 minutes. Feels like he's going to be one of the more popular options, I think, on this slate. So I do think that he is a really good play. We can shift over to shooting guard where, Paul George and James Harden have both already been ruled out. That leaves Tyrese Halliburton, who we already talked about at point guard, as the most expensive, then Devin Booker after that. But who are you looking at shooting guard specifically?
I mean, Halliburton, like you said, is your most expensive. The next guy there that you didn't mention is Jaylen Brown, and I'm not interested there. I have no real issues with him. I just don't really love the matchup and kind of what the Celtics are doing with him right now. But I don't have any real issues. He's priced appropriately, so I have no issues with him. You go down, and I can never get these guys right, but Anthony Edwards is 8K. It's a great matchup against the Charlotte Hornets, and I feel like whenever I choose him, Russell goes off. Whenever I choose Russell, Edwards goes off. So it's kind of hard to predict which one's going to have a good game, even when they both have good matchups like they do. I do like Edwards, though, at 8K. I think it's a little cheap. Since he doesn't produce on a consistent basis, it keeps his price tag relatively low for the upside that he really has. So I really like him there. You go down a little bit more. Terry Rozier at 7,900. It seems like it's a high price tag, right? It seems like it's semi-high, but this dude's been putting up 60 fantasy points, I think, in 2 of his last 3 or something along those lines. And he just constantly is amazing me with how he's doing it. I think he had a triple-double his last game, I think.
Yeah, he was 1 assist from a triple-double in 2 consecutive games. He did triple-double in one of them, and then 1 assist away from a second consecutive triple-double.
Yeah, so I mean, it's wild because the Hornets kind of have this. They have this rotation that they're kind of stuck with, and they like playing it. And Rozier's just one of those guys. He's going to see 35 minutes a game. All their starters more or less do, besides their center. So I really like Rozier there at 7,900. And I guess depending on Giannis news, I have no issues with Chris Middleton if he's out. If he's in, I have no interest whatsoever. You go down some more. Desmond Bain, regardless of if Morant is in or not, I think he's a pretty good play. 6,900 kind of seems like it's a lot, but he's been kind of flirting around the 35 to 40 fantasy point range. almost on a nightly basis. Gets a decent matchup against the Pelicans. Obviously, it's going to look a lot better if Morant doesn't play, but you'll get him at relatively lower ownership if he does play. Underneath that, Buddy Hield at 6K gets a matchup against the Bucks, who are just not good at guarding the three, and we finally see Buddy Hield starting. It's cool to see because when this dude's shot is falling, like, he is lethal, absolutely lethal, and this is the perfect kind of game for him to kind of just chuck a bunch of shots, which we know he can do and does on a nightly basis. So I think 6K is a little too cheap for what he can do. And then this is more or less if Morant's out, but DeAnthony Melton at 4,800 becomes a really good play if he's out. But that's more or less about it for me. I guess you could interest me in a CJ McCollum at 8K. He's kind of seemed to find a nice little role there in New Orleans. Been producing on a pretty consistently in his 2 or 3 games that he's played there, which is shocking because I didn't think it was going to be quite like that, but here we are. But that's about it for me at shooting guard.
Yeah, I think you outlined it well. Big thing for me about CJ McCollum is that he's literally the same price as Anthony Edwards, and I probably just play Anthony Edwards. And most likely I'm not spending 8K on CJ McCollum and Anthony Edwards tonight, which kind of puts me in a weird spot where, like, I highly doubt that I play CJ McCollum, but I do think that he's a completely fine play in that game. Terry Rozier, you hit the nail on the head. The dude is doing it all right now. 27 shot attempts, 17 threes. 3-point attempts. They didn't hit 17 threes in his last game, hit 6 of them. But 66.5 fantasy points in 2 straight. Just really tons of upside there. I think Karis LeVert is really interesting because of how bad Atlanta is against the shooting guards. They're one of the worst teams in the entire NBA against shooting guards. Add in that you get the assists from Darius Garland, and one of those two really, or both of them, could go nuts. I think this is kind of an interesting spot. Now, Karis LeVert isn't someone that I play in cash games, especially for his current price tag, but he does come with quite a bit of upside in tournaments. I think D'Angelo Russell is really interesting, and one of the things that I like about him is that it's very clear that on DraftKings, when you look at the opponent rank, which oddly enough people still do, the 9 next to it is point guards, and D'Angelo Russell doesn't play point guard for Minnesota. He actually plays shooting guard, and Charlotte is literally one of the worst teams in the NBA against shooting guards. So you're getting this weird thing where Charlotte is good against point guards. Now it makes it look like it's a bad matchup to anyone that's just looking, at the opponent rank, which, again, it's weird. It's 2022, but people still do it. And that'll keep his ownership down a little bit more there. Also fine with Desmond Bain, no issues. I do like the game. You hit Buddy Hield on the head. Milwaukee, really bad defending the 3, or I guess not so much that they're terrible defending the 3. They just force you to shoot threes. So it's not like they give up the highest percentage in the entire NBA, but they do allow the most 3-point attempts in the league. So Buddy Hield, really interesting spot there. Outside of that, it's tough to go down. I think you nailed D'Anthony Melton. If John Morant's out, feel free to use him. If Morant's playing, you're not really going to consider someone like Melton. And then the only other guy that I would think about is Terrence Mann, playing bigger minutes. Obviously, you already talked about Norman Powell. Obviously he got traded, was going to take some Terrence Mann's minutes. He's hurt, so Mann should be locked into the bigger minutes, especially if Luke Kennard's out again. And he's just a little bit too cheap for the upside that he possesses. So I do think that Terrence Mann is very reasonable against Phoenix tonight. We can shift over to small forward. What do you got here?
Yeah, I mean, I got no issues if Giannis plays playing him. He's matchup proof. It's a not terrible matchup against the Pacers, but no one's going to stop him. They don't have any size that's going to stop this guy. So I got no issues going there. Right underneath him is Jason Tatum with the matchup against the 76ers. His price is kind of getting up there. I think there's a little upside to be had, but I'd probably save that just for tournaments. Jimmy Butler, if he's in, I really like that play. 8,600 is just too cheap for him. No one on Dallas is really going to stop him. They're not going to put Luka on him, and even if they did, good luck. So I got no issues with that too. You keep on going down. I think Miles Bridges at 7,600 is just a little too cheap. All of these Hornets guys, all these starters are all playable on a nightly basis, and we've seen games where Bridges just goes off for like 60 fantasy points. Timberwolves just really aren't that good defensively. So I think Miles Bridges is interesting. You already mentioned Terrence Mann. That was someone I was going to bring up too. He's seeing a lot of minutes right now, and if Kennard's off again too, that's just probably another couple minutes thrown his way as well. He's pretty much locked into 30 to 35 minutes. So at that price, you really can't ask for more. And the only other guy I was going to mention was Sir Lance, but you already got to him at point guard. Just too cheap, 4K. He's seen a lot of minutes, and when his shot's falling, when that three is falling, it's really easy for him to pay off that price tag. But that's more or less about it. I guess you could maybe talk me into like a Dorian Finney-Smith at 4,500. He's seeing 30 plus minutes a game. He just doesn't seem to do a lot with those minutes. He's just kind of running a lot of wind sprints, but he's worth a shot in tournaments, specifically larger field ones. But that's probably about it for me. It's an ugly position again.
Yeah, I mean, it always is. I think I'll keep this super simple. If Giannis is in, I'll use Giannis. If Giannis is not in, I'll use Lance Stevenson. And I feel like those two are significantly better than everyone else at this position. That kind of is what it is. I don't need to do anything more ridiculous than that. If you want a few other potential plays for their price tags, Luke Kennard's out. Amir Coffey's way too cheap. He just played 30 minutes the other night. Matisse Thybulle is 3,800. He's a way to get you minutes on the court, at least. He can add defensive stats as well. Jay Crowder and Dorian Finney-Smith, very similar players that are getting minutes. I don't necessarily love either of them, but I think both are at least viable for the price tags. That's honestly, outside of guys that we talked about at shooting guard, that's probably about where I'm looking. I guess you can add in Jimmy Butler there if you want, but if you're paying up, you're going Giannis and kind of moving along, especially because Giannis is such a good fantasy player, and now you're throwing him at the very clear worst position. So just added value. Like, imagine if you could play Joker at small forward. You would just you already played Joker every single night at probably the deepest position in the NBA. Like, now imagine if you could play Joker at the weakest position. Like, you just do it. And that's more or less what you're going to do with Giannis tonight, most likely. But that's what I got for small forward. We can shift over to power forward. Who are you looking at here?
It's another position that I really don't love. The highest guy I got that I'm really looking at, Jaren Jackson Jr., 7,200. Gets a matchup against the Pelicans, and it's kind of the same story with this guy. As long as he can stay out of foul trouble, he's more or less going to have a really, really good night. He can add stats in rebounds, assists, blocks, steals, obviously points too. So you could really interest me in someone like him. You go down a little bit. Evan Mobley at 6,500, I think, is a little too cheap against these Atlanta Hawks. I'm not sure. I wasn't quite listening. Oh, yeah. So John Collins is out. So, yeah, they're going to Clint Capella and crew are going to have their hands full with those Twin Towers. So I expect one of them to get loose and have a good game. And I think Mobley's in more of a prime spot to do it. And he's cheaper than Jared Allen too. So I'll take that. It's almost a $1,000 difference in prices. So I'll take that discount there. Right underneath him, O'Shea Brissett has like come out of his shell, I guess you could say. I mean, I guess it has to do with Sabonis being traded and all, but this dude's just been on fire the last couple of games. I think he put up over 40 fantasy points his last 2 games. Still isn't priced appropriately. I don't know what DK was thinking here, but 5,400. It's just way too cheap. He's going to see over 30 minutes. He can add stats in all 5 categories. Really solid play. Probably a really good cash play, if you ask me. Underneath him is Jared Vanderbilt, who at 4,700, I think is just too cheap against the Hornets, who are just terrible at defending the power forward and center position for that. So you could really interest me in someone like him. Of course, he's kind of like Jaren Jackson. He's got to keep his hands to himself, because he can get into foul trouble early, and then he's no good to you at all. But definitely worth a shot in tournaments. And then the other value play I'd look at is Jalen Smith, who just came over to the Pacers, and unlike the Suns, they don't hate him. So he's finally getting playing time. He's not starting. I don't expect him to, but he's seeing good minutes off the bench, and you can really see what he can do. He's just too cheap, under 4K. That's more or less it for me at power forward.
Yeah, power forward's probably weaker than small forward tonight. It's pretty crazy. Again, I can keep this really simple for you guys. O'Shea Brissett, underpriced. Jalen Smith, underpriced. I'm going to end up on one of those two. You most likely use Brissett in cash games. I think Jalen Smith's probably a little too... I don't necessarily even know if he's too risky for cash because he's so cheap. And if he gets 20 minutes, you probably project him for 20 plus fantasy points anyway, which you would be fine with in cash games. But most likely you probably lean more towards Brissett in cash and Jalen Smith in tournaments. I think those two are pretty clear options. The only other two that I actually like on this slate probably would be Brandon Clark. I think he comes with plenty of upside. Also comes with quite a bit of risk. His minutes are very inconsistent. With that said, he can drop 30, 35 fantasy points in 20 minutes. So it's not like it always matters. And he does get a good matchup against New Orleans. And then the second one would be Jared Vanderbilt. You already talked about him. Very good rebounder, plus matchup against the Charlotte Hornets. Still cheap. It's because he's been struggling in recent games. His minutes, similar to Brandon Clark, aren't consistent. With that said, he doesn't necessarily need these massive minutes to put up big fantasy totals, and he's only 4,700. So those 4, excluding anyone I obviously said at small forward, are really the guys that I would add to this. More or less, I think that Danilo Gallinari gains a bit of value with John Collins being out as well. He should probably just continue to play his 20 to 25 minutes, though. It's not like Gallinari is really going to come in here and drop 35 minutes. The big thing is, at 4,500, he can pretty easily exceed value at only 25 minutes. So I do think that he's at least viable on this slate. Shifting to center, you very clearly have to make a decision at the top. Joel Embiid plays on the slate. He gets a tougher matchup against Boston. It's not like Boston has been this ridiculous team against centers in recent games, and Joel Embiid is coming off of, I believe, an 83 fantasy point game. The reason you have to make a decision here is because Karl Anthony Towns is priced under 10,000 and gets a matchup against Charlotte. And the other bigger reason that you have to make your decision between the two is because with no John Collins, Clint Capella should get 30 plus minutes, and he's grossly mispriced at 53. So Capella's probably the first center you're throwing into your lineups because you're going to take the salary relief, especially if you're looking to play someone like Giannis. So that means you only have one other spot, and now you're deciding between an almost 12K Joel Embiid, if you even can fit him with Giannis, or under 10K Karl Anthony Towns against Charlotte. What are you doing at the position?
Yeah, I gotta stick to Cat here. I just I'm sure more value will open up, but as it is right now, there's no way for you to fit Giannis and Embiid. I mean, I haven't personally tried it yet, but I'm just going off of the maybe one guy under 4K that we've mentioned. Cat's just got a great matchup under 10K. He's going to be popular. I guarantee you that. I go Towns. If I'm trying to get weird and go different here, I think Bam Adebayo at 7,900 is completely fine. This guy was like 9,200 a week ago. If Butler's out, he'll probably become a little more popular, but for good reason. So I got no issues going to him against the Mavericks, who just really don't have anyone who's going to stop him. Other than that, I got two more that I'll throw out, but it's more or less between Cat, Embiid, and Capella, or which one you want to use on top of them. I think Montrezl Harrell at 5,300 is more than fine. I think he's kind of growing into that starting center role, and he'll be there sooner rather than later. So we've kind of seen his minutes ramp up in the couple of games he's played with Charlotte. Also seen PJ Washington's minutes go down. I think there's some direct correlation there. Other than that, you could take a shot at Ivica Zubac at 4,500. They're gonna need his size against Ayton and McGee, so he's gonna be forced to play some big minutes. But yeah, I mean it's more or less Capella and what other big center you want to use.
Yeah, so I will disagree with you on this one. I will side with Joel Embiid. No Seth Curry. James Harden's not there. If you just look at what Embiid's doing in these types of situations, he dropped 40, 14, 10 in his last game. I wouldn't be shocked if he comes close to a triple-double again. He could drop, 40 real-life points again. Big thing with Robert Williams, and he has absolutely gotten it under control this season, but he likes to foul. Maybe they put Horford on him, but imagine Al Horford trying to guard Joel Embiid. It's not going to end well for Boston in that situation. So I do think that they put Robert Williams on him, obviously, in that type of a situation. Embiid had 15 free throw attempts in his last game. I think he's going to have 10 plus again, most likely tonight, or at least sit around that number. If you look at what he's done on the season, averaging over 60 fantasy points a game against Boston already, and now, no Curry, no Drummond backing him up. It's, I don't know, a really good spot. I think Karl-Anthony Towns is completely fine. I also put in Embiid. It's not actually that hard to fit him. If you fit him, you throw him and Giannis both in. You add Jalen Smith, who obviously is just grossly mispriced. Lance Stevenson, another guy that's grossly mispriced. And then Clint Capella, another guy way too cheap. You have like between 46 and 4,700 for a shooting guard and forward. That's not ideal, obviously, but very easily doable on a 7-game slate. So I do think that's completely viable. I like what you said about Bam Adebayo. I think right below him, Jared Allen is completely fine more in tournaments. Bobby Portis, Indiana just doesn't have any bigs at the moment. There's no one that's going to slow Bobby Portis down the same way there's no one that's going to slow Giannis down. The big thing is I probably just don't play them together. You probably focus on Giannis and then use Bobby Portis as a hedge. And then if Giannis gives way to someone like Portis, you have a clear advantage in tournaments in that situation. DeAndre Ayton, 100% fine with him in tournaments as well. Clint Capella, we already talked about as the very clear misprice. I completely agree with Montrezl Harrell, and I think if Capella wasn't priced where he is, which I believe is 5,300, I think they're the same price. I think Montrezl Harrell would probably be the very clear chalk option, and instead of just plugging in Capella, I think you would probably just plug in Harrell because it looks like Charlotte wants to give him minutes. And if that's the case, Harrell's always been very good on a per minute basis. He's never struggled in that type of a situation. So I do think he's a very good option. And then I agree. If you're going down, Ivica Zubac is probably the guy that you're focusing on. I don't necessarily know if there's any other cheap options that I'd really consider. I guess maybe, I don't know. I would have to see. Maybe Paul Millsap. Is he back yet? If he returns, I believe he's supposed to play backup center minutes in Philly. I don't know. That's probably way too thin of a play, don't you think?
Yeah, it's. I think he's set to make his debut tomorrow, but yeah, that's pretty thin on a position with a lot of different avenues you can go down, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. Well, let's strike Paul Millsap from the memory. Let's
Yeah.
not add him in here, as he probably goes for 40 fantasy points. But that's what we got for you guys. It's quite a few options. Again, if you enjoy the video, go ahead, give us a thumbs up, drop anything you want in the comments. We'll try to be there throughout the day to answer them. Thank you for watching. Hopefully everyone has quite a bit of success tonight, and we will be back tomorrow for another podcast.